Festival like this is a beautiful indication of the kind of thing that I truly, truly believe in, and I think makes our society more whole and more pure.
We do not take it for granted that Boulder was chosen as the first North American satellite festival. It's a huge honor we will not forget, and we are enriched because of it. We are indebted to both the local and international people that came together to make that happen, and we hope it's a tradition that continues for decades to come.
Literary festivals like this one build up an environment and an ecosystem to nurture readers and to promote the business of books. They provide an invaluable forum for writers to connect with other creative people.
We sit there peering into those electronic grids in front of our eyes, and it only increases the desire to see the real thing in the flesh. To actually hear an author speak firsthand, to read from their work, to hear the tones of their voice modulate as they read their most treasured passages of prose.
For us, it's special. This was our mothership, and it continues to be. The other editions that we have across the United States are smaller versions, different programming, but smaller versions. On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts and JLF Boulder, Boulder Public Library, the City of Boulder, we welcome you to JLF Colorado 2020, this very virtual festival. Congratulations on the results in the United States of America. And while we wish that we were there to receive you in person, hey, this is the best we can do online. I hope you all are safe and well. Our first session of the festival is The Essential Yann Martel in conversation with Diksha Basu, supported by the Consul General of Canada in Denver. A work of art is the beginning of a discussion. It's part of a dialogue. Taking us on a journey through his layered and multifaceted literary process, Booker Prize-winning author Yann Martel talks about the liberating power of the written word. In a conversation with writer and actor Diksha Basu, Martel explores the inspirations and essence of his work and talks about his journey as a writer. Yann Martel is the author of a collection of short stories and 4 novels, including Beatrice and Virgil, and his latest High Mountains of Portugal. Of course, his most memorable is Life of Pi, which won him the 2002 Man Booker Prize and was a global bestseller and was adapted to the silver screen by Ang Lee, garnering 4 Academy Awards. Diksha Basu is the author of The Windfall and Destination Wedding. She is a columnist at Mint Lounge, and her work has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, the BBC, and elsewhere. She has an MFA in creative writing from the Columbia University, where she is currently teaching. We're delighted to have Lonchura as the podcast partner for this session, and you can hear these sessions on Lonchura here on. May I please invite Sylvian Fabi, the Consul General of Canada in Denver and our supporter of the festival, to say a few words.
Hello and bonjour. My name is Sylvain Fabi, and I'm the Consul General of Canada for the U.S. Mountain West region based in Denver, Colorado. The consulate is excited to once again partner with the Jaipur Literary Festival to support 3 incredible artists from Canada, whom it will be my honor to introduce to you in a moment. The Government of Canada is a proud supporter of the arts, particularly stories created and told by diverse voices that have the power to open our eyes to new ideas and perspectives that broaden how we understand and live in this world. Why? Because art is activism. Stories have the power to capture our thoughts, our emotions, and help us better understand and relate to one another. And I'm excited to introduce the three artists with us at this year's festival. The first is Yann Martel, a highly decorated author, most famous for the best-selling novel Life of Pi, which won him the 2002 Man Booker Prize. The book was adapted to the silver screen by Ang Lee, garnering 4 Oscars. His next book, Son of Nobody, will be published in the spring of 2022 and is based on Homer's Iliad and the Trojan War. Also joining us is Emma Donoghue, most known for her work Room, whose film adaptation won Brie Larson an Oscar. Her latest book, The Pull of the Stars, explores human compassion and resilience amidst devastation. Our third author is political journalist and writer Tanya Talaga. Tanya's roots hail from the Fort William First Nation in Ontario, and she has won many awards for her books, such as 7 Fallen Feathers and other works exploring Indigenous stories and challenges in Canada and beyond. I thank each of you in the audience for joining us for Jaipur and these important author conversations. Enjoy the festival.
Thank you, Consul General of Canada, Sylvian Fabi. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. In these unusually difficult times, we have struggled to bring you JLF Colorado without charging a registration fee. So please do donate generously to the festival. That will allow us to continue to allow for the free flow of knowledge and information in these very difficult times. Ladies and gentlemen, the essential Yann Martel in conversation with Diksha Basu. Yann, Diksha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sanjoy. Yann, thank you so much for being with us this evening. This morning, I guess evening and morning is sort of all gone for a toss right now all around the world. Just before we started speaking, you mentioned that you've just finished your next novel and just submitted it. I don't know how much you're willing to talk about it, but could you mention a little bit about it? Give us a little preview of what we have to look forward to.
Sure, I'm very happy to speak about it. It will be called Son of Nobody. Once again, there's no the. How many people called it The Life of Pi? Used to drive me crazy, so I did it again. It'll be called Son of Nobody with no article, just Son of Nobody. It's inspired by the Trojan War, by Homer, by the Iliad, which was one of these big classics that I actually never read. I read lots of things about the Trojan War, things for children, just things inspired by it, but I'd never actually read Homer. So a few years ago, I finally picked it up, and I thought it'd be this dusty, sententious tome. And in fact, in a good translation, it absolutely blew me away. I was amazed at how powerful the very first book of the West was. And so it impressed me. And then more than that, Homer's muse started whispering to me. And I saw how in many ways it was very relevant to today. One of the things, for example, in Homer's Iliad, the only people who ever speak are either kings or princes or noble people of one sort or another. There's only one single commoner who speaks in the Iliad, a man named Thersites, who berates Agamemnon, the king of the Greeks, and is promptly beaten by Odysseus because he's questioning the system. So only one commoner speaks in a war in which thousands and thousands of soldiers would have fought. So that gave me one idea of what about all the common foot soldiers during that war? What did they have to say? And so I devised this idea of this lost Trojan War epic called the Soad, featuring a soldier named Soaz. And in a sense, it's an alt-Homeric view on the Trojan War. So yeah, I just finished it. I just sent it off to my editors 2 days ago. So a huge burden feels, it's been taken off my shoulders.
Wow, congratulations are in order for that. What is your process like as you approach, at what point do you decide you are going to send it to your editor? At what point do you decide to abandon it to someone else?
Well, as you would know, at one point, you can't do any more. To me, it starts slowly. First of all, it's an idea. A novel starts with me with a good idea, and that means an idea that has lungs. That's not just an anecdote that you can live with, like in a marriage, for a number of years. It takes me 3 to 5 to 6 years to write a book. So it has to be something that from different angles can be seen and say different things. And then I do research, and that gives me more ideas. which gives me more venues of research. So it sort of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it builds itself one small bit at a time. And you work and work and work, and you make mistakes. I mean, in this novel, for example, between my first draft and what I sent to my editors 2 days ago, I cut 77,000 words, which is longer than some of my other novels in their totality. So you cut a lot, and then at one point, well, I think you probably know, at one point it's just sheer exhaustion. You say, I can't do any more here. I've looked at this from so many different angles. I've honed every single bit of punctuation. And of course, my editor, I'm sure, will feel very differently and all that. But I think at one point you just give up. You feel, this is as much as I can do. Let me show it to my editors and see what happens next.
And is that what you're celebrating? You mentioned before we started that you're on a staycation, but you're sort of snowed in on a staycation.
I was supposed to be doing this. This is the lobby of a hotel. I was supposed to do this from home, which is 1 kilometer over there across a river. But Saskatoon, where I live, has had the worst snowstorm since 2007 in 13 years. And so the police has literally shut down the town. You're not allowed to drive unless you're driving home. And that's it. So on our staycation, we're like snowed in like one might be in Colorado sometime in the mountains. I'm snowed in this little Sheraton hotel across the river from where I live. But anyway, we're still managing to connect in that wonderful way of technology.
In fact, you know, you're adding authenticity. We could be in the snowy peaks of Colorado with the snow
We
behind. So the pandemic sort of hit, obviously, while you were deep inside this novel. Did it change? Did it change your writing? Did it change your process? Did it change your life in any way? Or were you already living reclusive novel writer mode?
Well, writing, I mean, some people write in cafes surrounded by people. I do like writing in isolation. I had myself built a little tiny studio, 10 feet by 12 in my backyard. It's tiny. I like that cozy little space. So it hasn't changed anything professionally, but let's not forget, I have 4 children and they're young. So last March, school shut down. So suddenly my partner and I were homeschooling our children. So that was certainly disruptive. But in terms of my writing process, no, because in a sense, writers, even if they write in cafes for that matter, you sort of in a sense shut out the world and you create your own world inside your head and you live with that world. So I've spent the last 3 years in a sense in the northwest of Turkey, on the Anatolian coast in the, fighting a Trojan War. So I was in my mind doing that. And, some writers write of the moment. The moment feeds them right away. The moment never feeds me. I never, the here and now doesn't inspire me. I live it, so why would I write about it? I still don't understand it yet. So I'd rather things far away geographically or far away historically. For some reason, that seems to stimulate me more. To be honest, the pandemic, other than the platitudes that everyone might sputter, I have nothing to say particularly about it. It's a tragedy. We need to address it. In the United States, I'm glad we're back. I'm glad Americans are back to a civil society now with the defeat of Trump and the arrival of Biden. A civil society is essential to our well-being everywhere. But no, my essential, I think the great thing about artists is we're lone elements. We're responsible to no one really except our own muse. And that can be bad, but it also means that we're not necessarily tossed about following the fads and the fashions of the day. We just go do our little thing, and sometimes that little thing speaks, and sometimes it doesn't. You never know.
So I'm very fascinated, and I'm sure the Indian audience certainly is, but probably everybody, by your relationship to India. And I know that you sort of had a bit of an awakening when you were there, but I don't know the story behind you coming there for the first time and your introduction to India and how it happened and your relationship with the country. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, in fact, I came to India following a girl. A girl was going to travel to Borneo, and then she decided to go to India, and she invited me, and she was beautiful. So I said, "Oh, I'll join you." So she left, and like 3 months later, I joined her. But to be honest, at that moment, I had no interest in India. I was just going to meet this girl, and funny thing is, it didn't work out with the girl, but it certainly worked out with the country. There's something profoundly refreshing and disturbing about India. It is the world's largest functioning democracy with a free press, extraordinarily diverse country. That's very stimulating. It's also a country of, horrible racism, the caste system, all these things. But what's interesting is all these things are right in front of you all the time. I find there's very little that's hidden in India. It's all on display, for better and for worse. So when I got there, I just found it extraordinarily stimulating, occasionally horrifying. It's the only place I've ever traveled to where I saw dead bodies. All my travels around the world, and I've traveled a lot, I actually never saw dead bodies the way I did fairly routinely in India. Accidents in Varanasi, people about to be cremated, stuff like that. And one thing that particularly stimulated me in India was the presence of religion. Now, I'm a completely secular Westerner where religion is totally marginalized and not taken seriously, and you can live very well like that. Living between art and science, you can live an entire life like that. And I got to India, and there, for better and for worse, religion is everywhere. All religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, you see them all. And because none had anything to do with me personally, I'm neither a Hindu nor a Buddhist nor a Muslim, I looked at them from the outside, and I saw these manifestations that I found surprisingly quite beautiful. These great pilgrimages, these beautiful temples, mosques, everything. I suddenly thought, why is this still going on? Science has triumphed long ago. How can people still be religious? What a weird thing. And I thought, well, it can't be that weird if so many people are still taking it seriously. And that little observation was the first step that eventually led to Life of Pi. I just thought, what is faith about? What if to study it, why don't I pretend to be religious? Why don't I pretend to invent a character who's religious and see what that's about? Because, of course, that's what's wonderful about art, is it allows you to explore other realities and take them on as your own. It's a wonderful way of being the other. The sexual other, the sexual orientation other, the ethnic other, the religious other. And you finally realize that when you become the other, there is no other. Really, otherness is sort of just an illusion. And if you look at it closely enough, it dissolves. And there is a basic commonality to humanity that has a million reflections. And that's what I discovered while I was in India.
Now, as you sort of put on that guise of the other, and in this case, someone with a sort of religious existence, did it change you beyond the writing of that book? How did it change your relationship with faith, or with however you define religion for yourself now?
Well, I still I have no particular interest in organized religion. So the various churches of the world, with their pundits that take themselves very seriously, the Catholic Church, Islam, the Ayatollahs, and all those who kidnap religion, I don't have any interest in them because they're often very dangerous. They suppress any number of people, women, gays, Jews, etc., lower castes. I don't like that. But that phenomenon whereby you believe in something for which you have no proof, gods of any variety, that I found durably interesting. Because you know what? To me, it's not so different from the person who picks up a novel. When you pick up a novel, in a sense, you suspend your disbelief. You have faith for the duration of that novel in the characters there, and it transforms you. A great novel, we all know this, a great book changes you. In a sense, the same thing with religion. You have to suspend your disbelief, and then it changes you. So I certainly respect that phenomenon more now than I used to. I used to be quite dismissive, saying it was just religion is nothing but ignorance, a manifestation of fear and misunderstanding. There's a lot more to it than that. So I'm not personally religious in a conventional way, but I respect that imaginative way of reinterpreting the world. Because in fact, that's what faith is. It reinterprets material reality in a way that infuses it with new meaning. And that's extraordinarily powerful. And as I said, to me, it does in many ways what art does. Art doesn't make the claims that religion does, of course. Art doesn't claim that, they're immortal beings and all that. But it's funny how in some ways art and religion both endure. We still love art from hundreds of years ago, whether it's paintings or literature or music, in the same way religion goes through the ages. Whereas very little else survives time the way religion and art do. History draws in a dry way if you're a historian, but in a living way. I don't know why I'm just thinking of Jane Austen. We still read Jane Austen and are really moved by it and amused by it, even though it's 300 years old. And the same thing, religion just passes through time and still remains fresh and alive. And so I find a certain similarity to the two phenomenons. And so as an artist, I respect art more, religion more, because I see many parallels between it and art.
But you speak about this so eloquently and so convincingly. But I wonder if you worry that for you as someone who has a big audience. And for you to talk about religion in the way that you do with the respect and the affection that you do you worry about how it is often treated these days, increasingly globally, especially in countries like India, where it's difficult to defend it at times? And to how do you feel about the fact that you're still talking about it in these terms while it's being used in horrible ways?
I totally agree with you. I don't disagree with anything you've just said there, except you can't simplify. It'd be like saying, democracy's got to be bad because it elected Donald Trump. You can't dismiss a system because of its mistakes and errors and aberrations. So democracy has yielded, Hitler was first elected in Germany. In 1933, he was elected chancellor. Donald Trump was elected. The vagaries of the system has to do with people who kidnap it. I'm not defending in any way the excesses of organized religion, neither in India. Hindu nationalism is doing terrible things to democracy. In no way am I defending Modi here. That's a terrible thing that is happening in India. Nor do I defend the crazies in the United States, the insane Christian evangelicals who are backing Trump. So I don't defend those, but that's not the whole picture. And you can't dismiss it all because you're not going to win. You have to be more subtle. In a sense, what has to happen is Hindus in India have to take Hinduism back from Hindu nationalists. If you kill in the name of a god, you haven't understood it. So you can't just abandon everything, because you know what happens then is you're losing a part of your imagination. It's all fine for an Indian to be secular, but to completely deny everything to do with Hinduism is to sort of deny a huge part of Indian culture. So all I say is reject what is bad in it and try to keep what is best. A total cliche here is Mahatma Gandhi was a Hindu, very much a Hindu. If you throw everything with Hinduism, you're throwing him out too. So I just think you have to have a more subtle approach. But definitely extremism has to be fought. But extremism has nothing to do with religion. I'm sorry, someone who kills someone in the name of God is misunderstanding any religion. Jihad is, Muslim jihad does not warrant the killing of innocents at all. So it's a question of having a more subtle vision and parsing the good from the bad.
And do you think as we move forward, and of course right now the US is feeling particularly hopeful, but in general, do you think that nuance that you talk about in terms of religion will be what takes over instead of the organized swing towards the right that we have been witnessing around the world? Are you hopeful?
Well, there's no easy, simple solution. Listen, it all takes time. Evangelicals aren't going anywhere. You just have to put them in their place. Not have the ear of the White House listening to them necessarily any more than anyone else. But India, like the United States, is a country that has freedom of religion. You're allowed to believe anything you want, as crazy as you want, so long as you don't infringe the rights of other people. So people can believe in anything they want, just they can't be violent. As for, civil society, the United States has to go back to a notion of civil society where you respect the other, you don't shout at the other, you don't insult the other. Now that that toddler is out of the White House and grown-ups will move back in, hopefully the dialogue will improve. Hopefully people will settle down. I suspect a lot of the 70 million people who voted for Trump, they're not all crazies. Some maybe voted just for economic reasons. They felt that his economic policies were good. I think it's only a tiny minority who are really insane. And they'll have to be dealt with by the law. Anyone who commits an illegality should face the law. And everything else, we have to develop ears. People talk a lot. They have to listen more, to listen to the other. And it's the same thing in India, same thing in every country that's torn by dissension. At one point, you have to calm down and listen to the other. It's a subtle thing being a citizen. It's a subtle thing. It's not just a question of a constitution. It's not a question of just an election every 4 years. You have to make choices every day that are wiser choices than have been made recently.
Speaking of citizenship, have you, I know that you were born in Spain, is that right? And then you sort of moved around all over. How long have you called Canada home? Or what do you call home?
I've always been Canadian. I just happened to be born in Spain of Canadian parents who were studying there. They were studying Spanish language and culture. So I've always been Canadian. And in some ways, there's a lot of countries that are federations, but Canada is a very successful one. It's an extraordinarily diverse country that still managed to work, in a sense like India. You know, for all the terrible things that's happening recently with Hindu nationals in India, it still functions as a society. Now, they're horrors. The pandemic has struck India terribly. But I mean, as I said to start with, India is the world's largest democracy. That's not a given. You know, to work as a democracy takes a lot of work. Indians are doing that. So I think we'll muddle through the way we are. You know, we've been through worse. You know, we survived, the world survived Hitler. The world survived Stalin and Mao Zedong. We will survive what's happening right now. The pandemic will be put in its place eventually, and so will the Putins and the Trumps of this world.
Speaking of Canada, I have to give you a quick aside. One of my cousins who lives in Quebec, she told me when I told her I was speaking to you this evening that in 2006, you were at a symphony in Quebec and she tapped you on your shoulder. You were sitting in front of her and she tapped you on your shoulder in order to tell you that she was a huge fan.
Oh, that's very sweet.
So, in case you remember a short Indian woman telling you that several years ago, that was my cousin. Have you been back to India recently? Do you still travel there at all?
To India. Well, I was at the Jaipur Literary Festival just a few years ago, my first time, and I also did something, what was it called, in Kolkata. I did a literary festival in Kolkata, and I did some events in Delhi. You know, it was my fourth time in India, but my first time in like nearly 16 years, I think. And I was slightly worried that I'd get there and I'd say, oh, been there, done that. But no, it was so extraordinary being back. Because I remember the first time I arrived in India, in Delhi, getting out of the plane and this wall of humidity hitting me like a brick wall. And I remember being completely electrified, saying, oh my God, this place is so alive. And it was that same feeling last time I got there, and it was, everything delighted me. The things that don't work, the things that work, everything. I just find it such a, as I said, there's obviously terrible things. We go about the terrible things that happen in India, but there's a liveliness to it that I find in a West that is often beholden to consumerism, apathy. You know, in India, you still have massive demonstrations, massive festivals, massive everything. People, it's a very people place. It's not just Bombay's a crowd. India's a crowd, and you see it milling about and alive, so alive. So that always struck me. The intellectual ferment in India, for example, this world-class intellectual class that you have in India, and the Jaipur Literary Festival is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and the crowds as well, and the energy and the excitement of Jaipur. I've been living in Bombay for the last several years, and I absolutely love it. And I am sort of itching now to get back there as soon as we can. But you write only in English. You don't write in any other language. Is that right?
I occasionally write in French. It is my mother tongue, after all. I'm from Quebec, but I always went to school in English. I occasionally write in French, but no, I write in English. It's this wonderful, stretchy, elastic language that is cannibal and eats every other language, and you know, it's such a rich, powerful language. So yeah, I write in English. I'm very happy writing in English.
Have you? How do you feel reading your work in translation in French? You don't translate your own work, I assume.
No, but Life of Pi was translated by my parents, for example. It's, well, as reading something in translation is always a bit strange because you recognize it, but it has a different face, a different sonority. So it's a bit weird. You always prefer the original version. Like, I read all my Russians, my great Russians, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, all those. Of course, I don't read a word of Russian, so I read them in English, and they seem amazing in English. But when I read, for example, Life of Pi in French, I say, oh, it's even better in English, you know. So I can't imagine what, you know, Tolstoy would be like in Russian. But, you know, you lose something, you gain something. Where you lose something, your imagination. You know, for example, my father's a wonderful poet, and he sent me a text that was amazing. But when I spoke with him about it, I realized that I misread the very last word. The very last word was, in French, pendre. Se pendre. Se pendre means to hang yourself. But because the text concerned a painting, I thought it was peindre. P-E-I-N-D-R-E, which means to paint. So the man said I was going to go into the forest to hang myself, and I misread it and said the man was going to go into the forest to paint himself. And it reminded me of Borges' circular rune. So I misunderstood it, but it worked totally fine. In fact, it was amazing. I said, what a great way to finish the story. And my father coldly told me I didn't write to paint himself. He wanted to hang himself. I said, oh, sorry. but it worked just as well, you know? So I think translations like that too. Maybe nuances are missed, but you add other stuff that makes the text just as rich.
And how do you feel about, well, a different sort of translation, seeing your work on the screen? Less enthusiastic? Why?
Well,
what was your reaction to the runaway success that was Ang Lee's Life of Pi?
Yeah, you know, a novel is 330 pages, a screenplay is 115, lots of space, only dialogue. You necessarily lose a lot. So Ang's movie was brilliant visually. It was an extraordinary production, but it kind of looked like the story, but it didn't feel like it, I thought. But, you know, it was a good introduction. I shouldn't complain. It still brought the story to lots of people. It still brought India to the screen. You know, it was actually shot in parts of India. So I was grateful for him to have done that. It's rare to see India portrayed in Western movies with West Indian actors and Indian music. I was grateful for that. And it did bring it to people who couldn't read the book or didn't read the book. So, but, you know, I'm a writer. I'm not a filmmaker. So I did prefer the book.
Have has anything else of yours been adapted for the screen or been in the process of getting adapted for the screen? How do you get involved in the screenwriting?
Well, no, because it's very expensive making a movie, so they don't usually want the writer involved, especially if the writer doesn't know about filmmaking. Yeah, I had earlier stuff that was turned into movies, smaller productions here in Canada. I don't mind it. Listen, I like risks, so I don't mind the risk of adaptation, whether to the stage. For example, Life of Pi is coming out as a stage play. It was supposed to open in the West End in London last summer, but of course the pandemic hit and it's been delayed. And it's going to play also in Toronto and likely in New York. So it's been put off. And that production is amazing. The London production, it started in Sheffield, is mind-blowing. Those little simple tricks of theater really bring it to life. So, you know, I like the risks that artists take, all artists, so I respect that. So I'm willing to have them taken. Sometimes they work not quite as well.
Right. I was told we're going to be, by the way, moving to audience questions quite soon. But before that, I did have a question from someone earlier who wanted to know what your primary influences were that sort of first brought you to writing. How did you start? How did you become a writer?
I became a writer, I think, just by discovering language. You know, I vividly remember, it must have been grade 1 or 2 when you learn how to write. And I must have been in Costa Rica, and the teacher had written the word in and the word to on the board, and then she circled and said it can become one word, the word into. And I remember that blew my mind. I said, wow, that's so cool. So something right away, I guess, about language amazed me. I love being in language, even spelling, punctuation. It's like asking a painter. A painter loves paint, loves the materiality of paint, the texture of it, the composition on the canvas. For me, it's the same with language. I just love being in language. So that was the first influence. I just love being in language. And then it's reading, 1,001 books of different kinds that showed me what could be done with the word. So, when I was a kid, let's start young. When I was a kid, I loved bande dessinée, comic strips, Asterix, Tintin. I love those. Stories are wonderful because they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They bring you into it. They show you the world. They transport you. So eventually what happened, I remember in my early 20s, I was afraid of the world. I didn't know what I could do in the world, what job I could do. And while I was waiting to become someone, I just doodled around writing little stories, thinking they were of no consequence. And I just got better and better at it. And they were nourished by, if you ask me the single living writer I like the most, I think I admire the most, would be J.M. Coetzee, the South African. It's amazing how much he does with such a spare language. He's very spare, but it's so extraordinarily powerful. I mentioned earlier the Russians. I've been once to Russia. That's not true. I have been to Russia, but I read all the Russians, and I thought they were so amazing. The early Americans, the great Anglo-American tradition, the Hemingways, Faulkners, Sinclair Lewis, all those. The novel was so experimental in the 10s and 20s in the US. People like John Dos Passos, who's not read very much nowadays. It's extraordinary how experimental they were. So those, and and one writer that I really liked for a long time, well, still like her, is Willa Cather. the American writer, Willa Cather. Virginia Woolf is amazing what she's done. All of these people, you look at them all and you sort of see and you look at them and eventually you ignore them. And you have no influence and you just try to become yourself. And you let go of these influences. So I've been through all of that. I think all writers to some extent are like that. You can only become a writer by first reading.
That's very nicely put, and that leads us well into the audience questions that are now coming to me. And so we have Emma, who's asking that both Life of Pi and the High Mountains of Portugal contain important elements of travel and adventure. Does good fiction necessarily have to be about something out of the ordinary?
No. There's lots of, Carol Shields, The Stone Diaries, our explorations of the quote-unquote ordinary. So no, I don't think you need adventure travel. That's just a reflection of my own life, my own interests. I happen to be someone who likes looking out. I'm not particularly interested in the psychological and the inward. I don't find my own life particularly interesting. I like going out. So, we mentioned travels to India. I've also traveled through Iran, imagine. I've traveled through Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, loved it. I traveled in South America. I lived for years in Europe. So no, that's just my life. But no, I think you can lock yourself up in a room and write great fiction. Emma Donoghue, Room. I think it's possible to write from within. I just happen to like writing looking out.
Alan is saying that he finds that the general consensus is that film adaptations tend to fall short compared to the works of literature, and whether you can think of any examples for yourself to the contrary.
Yes, I can actually. Usually science fiction, for example. So, for example, there's a novel called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, whose author I've just forgotten. And it was turned into a Blade Runner. Blade Runner is a better book, a better movie than the material it was based on. There's also a wonderful dystopian novel called Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. The actual story is not quite as good. There's other elements thrown in that are not interesting, whereas the movie by François Truffaut is better. He focused only on that story of the firefighter who burns books. And it's just more powerful because it's a very simple story and with great actors. So there's the odd example. Oh, another one. It's lowbrow stuff, like, James Bond. Ian Fleming was a terrible writer. But the movies are wonderful. The James Bond movies, as a genre, are very, very good. I wouldn't know particularly, but I think most pornography is better as a movie than as a written work, I would guess. So there are some exceptions, I would think. Some murder mysteries. Agatha Christie is usually pretty good in some adaptations, although I'd still prefer reading her than seeing her. So there are some exceptions, but I would agree, literary works, or middlebrow to highbrow, the written word is so wonderful because you create the movie in your head. So I would agree that there's not too many exceptions.
So one question that's coming up from Sunil Bhandari, I think we sort of touched on, but in case you wanted to say anything else on, he's asking if religion doesn't slowly coalesce into hostility towards other faiths.
Well, I touched on this. It depends on how you practice it. If you are afraid of the world, you'll use God as your tool. If you're not afraid of the world, then why would you be afraid of the world? There's actually nothing to be afraid of the world. In all my travels, I've never met people who are dangerous except people who are momentarily afraid. There's no particular reason there's no reason why I should be afraid of an Indian. There's no reason why they should be afraid of someone from Colorado. There's no reason. We're all here to muddle through our lives and get as much love as we can. So anything misused, democracy, religion, will be a weapon, but that's misusing it. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be a tool of hostility.
The inevitable Life of Pi questions are now coming in one after another. So the first one is why Pi? Really curious for the protagonist's name. Molly is asking this, and please share your inspiration behind that.
Yeah, pi, well, as you know, is an irrational number. 3.1415926 goes on forever. That's called in mathematics an irrational number, and yet it's used all the time in mathematics and science to make rational sense of things. The irrational is used to make sense of things. In a sense, to me, religion and art are the same thing. They're vaguely irrational, but they help make sense of things. Someone who lives with no arts and no religion has very little to live on. You can't just live being reasonable. It's very dull being reasonable. You want a bit of craziness. The perfect example, the most obvious example, is love. It doesn't make any sense to love anyone because they may die in an accident, they may turn on you. Totally makes sense to be loveless, to be completely self-autonomous, autarkic. Why would you want to be like that? We want that craziness called love. So that's just one instance, banal example of the kind of craziness that we want. So I call the character Pi to sort of symbolize that. Also, I like the idea of a boy who likes swimming in a rectangular shape ending up in the Pacific. So throughout the book, I use this combination of the rational, the irrational, and put them together.
Simon Smee is asking that at one point in Pi's adventure, you speak of the role of taking care of the tiger as saving Pi's own life. Should we sense a little Buddhist thinking there, that when we're outwardly focused, that's when we find serenity, when we get rid of the self?
Yes, I agree. That sounds like a good interpretation. I'm not going to box, anyone can interpret the book the way they want. That sounds like a very good one.
And I can see now, as we approach the end of this, Bollywood fans are here because Tanya Talwar wants to know if you got a chance to meet Irfan Khan and what that experience was like.
I did, because he came to, the last 2 days of the shoot were in Montreal, and I was invited to be there. So I met Irfan Khan, and I was very sad when it was announced that he was sick and when he died. He was a sweetheart. He was such a nice, modest man, hardworking, totally willing to work with Ang Lee to do what Ang Lee wanted. Yeah, he was a sweetheart. It was really nice. It was really nice meeting. I also met, I've just forgotten her name. I'm sorry. The woman who played Pi's mother.
Tabu?
Yes, Tabu. I also met Tabu, not in Montreal, but I met her later on in Vancouver. I met Tabu. She was interesting. Yeah, she was also very interesting. So, Irfan Khan was a sweetheart. He was a very sweet man.
Well, Yann, as we wrap up, and I hand this back to Sanjoy, before that, the book that you mentioned that you've just turned in, when do we get to read it? When will it be on shelves?
Well, because of COVID and all that, books have been clogged and then released, and there's been everything's been chaos. It'll likely come out in the spring of 22, I would think. So a year and a half from now. There's a while yet. It still has to be edited, has to be published and all that. So probably the spring of 22. And
are you taking a break or already on to the next idea?
No, I'm taking a bit of a break. I need a break. I put everything in it, and so first it needs to be edited still, but no, I'm going to take a bit of a break and, sit back and think and enjoy, read more and be with my children.
Well, thank you so much, Yann. Thank you for joining us. And I think Sanjoy is now going to take over as well.
Thank you very much, Diksha.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diksha Basu. Thank you so much, Yann Martel. And if you remember, we actually had Tabu down for the Indian Summer Festival in Vancouver, where you had
that's
come
where I met her.
like a million years ago. But thank you for that, and thank God we have religion and the arts, as you're saying, and we don't have to be considered. We have books and literature, and that's what it's about. And this conversation was absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Diksha, for doing such a brilliant job of it. And Yann, best wishes for the new book. We look forward to reading it in 2022 meanwhile. And for those of you who want to buy your books, you may please do so. You can just log on to the Boulder Bookstore and order up your books, or in India, you can log on to Full Circle. And of course, you can buy your books there as well. Thank you to all our partners. And if you've enjoyed these conversations, please stay on for our next session, which is the Himalayas and Ecological Battle, Trevor Price and Stephen Alter in conversation. And that's at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 7 p.m. Pacific Time. And through the festival, we are delighted to present the JLF Writer Shorts, Readings and Recitations. This one is by Ardhara Sivasankaran. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is Ardhara Sivasankaran, and I'm here to read my poem Honey Tongue. Honey Tongue. I'm a compulsive note taker. Lessons, recipes, feelings, the entire trope. I fear the day someone will find my books empty and discover I'm not a carefully curated passion project. In moments of distance from sheets and screens, hands full, ink run dry by the air and its molecules of priority, I just scratch many transparent lines, untrusting of the transcription of my headspace into the 2 dimensions of a blank page. These words I've never spoken, I don't know how to do them. Some I never intended to think. But unsaid words, like droplets of honey, refuse to drip and blend with the tea. Once in your tea, the spoon has no home in the jar, so take a minute to discern how much honey you really need. I shouldn't have interrupted with my talking. When you transcended into that song, I always forget to resist sticking an expectant tongue under the spoon, caving into that unfallen drop of honey. It's careful intuition, no measure to it. The words could tumble all at once. But the aftertaste of one too many can overwhelm the tongue, plastering your mouth shut. You'd sung too little. It didn't seep into my skin like the first time. I'd taken notes on you long before I needed to. They've come to aid as I learn and extract nectar from memory, wherein cooped up are the paranoid. What if they stepped outside your melody? And you? What will you give to delve into the unsaid as sweet as honey? The tea to my honey tongue, will you learn the music of me? Thank you.
केसरिया परम अवोरी पधारो हरे
I would call the Jaipur Literature Festival a living library, or perhaps even a library of life. Do join us as we share the excitement of ideas and of debate and dialogue, of the adventures of science, of the joys of poetry and music, the consolations of philosophy, the sense of literature and of life.
So much about the festival in India, the scale of it, the energy of it, and I just love the fact that there is this effort to bring it to other cities in the world.
It's a variety of topics. It's meaningful. I'm just excited. I'm feeling like I've learned a lot to think about, and I appreciate JLF coming here.
Going forward, it would be a very good thing to do for the community to have this event on an annual basis.
I think that when you hear so many different voices and perspectives about the South Asian diaspora and many other issues, you learn that there's a lot of history that you're not taught every day, and I think that that's important to bring in today's world.
I was actually really surprised by the camaraderie I experienced here and the way that people at JLF, both attendees and other panelists, seem to really connect profoundly to literature and care about it.
In 2020, our live version of JLF has been laid to waste because of COVID-19. However, nothing's going to stop us from coming in the way of bringing our writers and speakers to you in Boulder, Colorado, Houston, New York, and Toronto, Canada.
Teamwork Arts, bringing India to the world and the world to India through Indian art and culture for over 30 years. One of Teamwork Arts' signature events, the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, is the world's largest free festival of its kind. With daily interactive sessions, lively debate and dialogue, and international music performances every night, it's no wonder the festival attracts over 500,000 visitors a year. The Jaipur Bookmark, an international B2B event for the publishing industry, happens during the Z Jaipur Literature Festival and sees a confluence of publishers, writers, and literary agents. Teamwork Arts, producers of the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, have taken the flavor of the festival to international shores with vibrant events in the UK, Australia, and the US. Teamwork Arts takes India's artistic diversity to the world with almost 12 festivals of India across continents in a stunning array in over 40 cities. A feast for the senses, these are spectacles of dance, music, cinema, theatre, literature, and so much more. In each of these places, Teamwork Arts' colourful festivals of India are the high points of the annual cultural calendars. Be it Confluence in Australia, India by the Bay in Hong Kong, India by the Nile in Egypt, Iron India in Chicago, Shared History in South Africa, India in the Sunshine City in Zimbabwe, Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Kala Utsavam in Singapore, Sarang in South Korea, festivals in Abu Dhabi, Shanghai, Sweden. The list is dizzying. The Jazz India Circuit is an endeavor by Teamwork Arts to spread the word and sound of jazz across the country. The 2017-18 season, 4 festivals across 3 cities featuring over 25 stellar artists from India and around the world, including Jojo Mayer and Nerve, drummer-singer Jameson Ross, and Dave Weckel, who collaborated with the talented Mohini Day. The Mahindra Kabira Festival celebrates the spirit, lyric and verse of the 15th century mystic poet Kabir in his birthplace, the historic city of Varanasi. Kabir's poetry is about inclusiveness. Mahindra Kabira brings to music lovers an unforgettable experience of listening to leading exponents of the classical Banaras Gharana and rich folk traditions of music on the legendary banks of the mighty river Ganges, along with sessions on art and literature, specially curated walks with famous local residents and delectable local cuisine. Sacred celebrates the spiritual through music and its ability to heal. International artists collaborate with world music exponents from India amongst the most incredible desert settings on the banks of the Pushkar Lake. Heritage walks, meditation, talks and workshops are part of this weekend experience. Teamwork Arts so promotes and recognizes the best of Indian theatre through the Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards. The Meta Week in Delhi is an enthralling showcase of the 10 best nominated plays shortlisted from numerous entries received from across the country and across languages. The Meta Lifetime Achievement Award has been presented to leading lights of India's theatre industry. For the young and the young at heart, the Ishara International Puppet Theatre Festival brings local and international performances to audiences across several Indian cities. While the Multi-City Kahani Festival features interactive storytelling sessions and workshops championing the power of imagination. Bollywood love story, a musical. Our international touring productions such as Bollywood Extravaganza and Flamenco India have sold out shows across Europe, Egypt, Russia and Spain. Expressions International Contemporary Dance Festival showcases Indian and international productions, bringing together several dance genres for Indian audiences. Teamwork Arts, celebrating the arts. For more information, visit www.teamworkarts.com.
Festival like this is a beautiful indication of the kind of thing that I truly, truly believe in, and I think makes our society more whole and more pure.
We do not take it for granted that Boulder was chosen as the first North American satellite festival. It's a huge honor we will not forget, and we are enriched because of it. We are indebted to both the local and international people that came together to make that happen, and we hope it's a tradition that continues for decades to come.
Literary festivals like this one build up an environment and an ecosystem to nurture readers and to promote the business of books. They provide an invaluable forum for writers to connect with other creative people.
We sit there peering into those electronic grids in front of our eyes, and it only increases the desire to see the real thing in the flesh. To actually hear an author speak firsthand, to read from their work, to hear the tones of their voice modulate as they read their most treasured passages of prose.
For us, it's special. This was our mothership, and it continues to be. The other editions that we have across the United States are smaller versions, different programming, but smaller versions.